Hi guys, welcome to the new episode of Rejection Chronicles. Episode 9, my favorite number. And not only is it my favorite number, it also means we're almost at double digits here. And as it happens, I'm also almost done with this story of rejection. For now. I'm sure there's going to be more coming in the future, but we've pretty much caught up to 2020 here. So I was thinking, if you like this vlog, if you've been here for a while, and if you think it could potentially help some other struggling artists, authors, writers, painters, whoever really, everybody struggles. If you think this vlog could help them feel less alone or be uplifted in any way, then please link it to them. Help me make something positive come out of this entire endeavor. So if I never actually get published, then at least I will have done something with it. And as for today's episode, we're catching up to 2020 and we're going to talk about I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't quite know how the writerly meta looks like out there in the English-speaking world, and to be honest, I'm not sure if it hasn't changed in Poland either. But when I was younger, the general consensus amongst the adults here, the writers, the experienced folk, anyone, was that you should not be starting your writing with novels. You should start by writing short stories. Write a bunch of them. Practice the craft, get familiar with the language, the rules, the punctuation, the way you type in dialogues, all of that stuff. And then throw those stories away because they will be garbage, and then write more. And as you start getting experience, start getting better at it, send them to some contests, send them to some possibly smaller magazines, or even try a bigger one, and then finally publish your short stories in the biggest, most respectable magazines here. And only then, once you're old and grow a beard and go grey, you're kidding. Not the way, well, one second. Only then you should go and publish a novel. And yes, I'm kidding, but when I was a child, when I was a teenager, and that basically applies to most other teenagers, we did see it as, keep writing the stories until you're old and grey, forget about, becoming a prodigy, forget about doing anything cool, and by goodness, do not sin by starting a trilogy. just write those dumb short stories, go step by step. It is a fine advice. Of course it's fine advice. Is it a perfect advice? I don't agree, because even though right now I see the merits in it, I still think that if a teenager is into writing novels, they will learn more by writing shitty novels than they will by writing short stories that they hate. And so this is why I wonder if the meta hasn't changed, because the teenagers that I was and other teenagers, with internet around, I think we will find it easier to understand that perhaps there are various paths you can take, but when I was younger, everyone told me to start by writing short stories. And I really didn't like it. Because I don't like short form that much. Sure, if something is based on an amazing idea, yes, a great movie, a great short story, a short animation that really just grips you and drives the point home in few words, it can be great. But in general, I really prefer long forms. I want to get into the story, get to know the characters, get to know the themes, and then just explore them, Explore them in every direction, go in depth, and kind of just, escape into this different world or whatever, and get to live there for a while. For instance, there is this movie, I remember it is a great example for me, Blade Runner. I remember my mom recommended it very much, and everybody was like, oh yeah, it's a great movie. I'm not saying it isn't, but I watched it and I felt like it's just, skipped on the surface of the story, skipped on the surface of the characters, skipped on the surface of the themes. And while it was all smooth and sleek and well done, and it was generally entertaining, and the story was generally fine, I felt like, but I want more. I want to know what's this, what's that. This theme just started. I was like, yeah, I want to know what's going to happen with that, and the movie just ended. So, for me, writing short stories was never something appealing. And I know that I shared this with all the other teenage wannabe prodigies of writing. It's nothing original, and I just didn't listen to anyone telling me otherwise. And I don't regret it, because, well, actually I have written one short story. So I've told you before about the book, my first book that I've ever written, the one in Polish, with, the evil avatar of evil that had a wolf puppy, the fairy dragon following her, and the deer, of course, the deer. Who would ever forget the deer? And after all this incessant badgering, like, short stories are the way you should start writing short stories, I was like, fine, I'm gonna write a short story. But I'm going to set it in this existing world, and I'm going to use the characters, because at least then it's more like an expansion to the story, like a tiny little prelude to something that happens in the book. Just something to keep, latch onto, and not be it just a detached story that doesn't have any depth in it. Not saying there are no short stories that have depth in it. They do, but there was no way young me was able to pull that off, especially when she didn't like it. So I was like, fine, I'll give it a go. And of course I tried, because it was not like I was, forced to do it. I wanted to write a good short story, but I wrote crap. It was the most derivative, soulless piece of literature I've ever committed. I mean, not even the mermaid story was as bad, I don't think so. It was literally a tale of one of the wizards from the book who went to a different world to chase an artifact to bring it back. And there was the other wizard from the story that wasn't as good, and they had some conflict while they were chasing after the bloody artifact, which was a goddamn crystal with some sort of sentience, and it was evil. It was so horrible. And I didn't enjoy writing it. I tried to. I tried to enjoy writing it, and I tried to make it good, but this is why I firmly believe that if you don't like short form, if you want to write a trilogy because that's what's, singing in your soul, even if it's going to be the most derivative trilogy ever committed, even if it's going to be like a copy of Lord of the Rings with a sprinkling of Twilight, just do it, right? Yes, it will be shit, but you will learn so much more from it than you will from forcing yourself to write short stories that you just don't want to do. Because we learn the best when we do something we enjoy. So yeah, commit literally atrocities in whatever form you desire. If you want to write just, descriptions for days, nobody will read it. Do it. Write just dialogues, write just snippets of whatever. You can learn the basics of writing anywhere. And yes, they say the short stories teach you constructions, and they do. And I can see how you can learn to write short, concise things if you practice short stories. And I have said before that I struggle with brevity. I always just expand the stories because, I want to explore all of those themes. And perhaps if I forced myself to write short stories in the past, maybe I wouldn't have that problem. I don't know. I will never know, but I also think that the way you construct a novel is wildly different from the way you construct short stories. And sure, perhaps it would teach me to be more disciplined in the way I build my stories. It's possible, but it's also possible that then I would struggle with going into, seeing the way I could connect various plots together, or how to create stories that are more intricate and have this, the depth novel allows you to have. It's also possible. I will never know. I chose my stubborn path. Clearly, it hasn't worked out perfectly for me, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I regret because I think they were right, even though I don't, just to look good. I don't know. I think it's very personal, and for most people, for most of those teenagers, writing is going to be a hobby. They will want to do something different in life, and it's a cool hobby. It's a hobby that really allows you to develop your thinking, expand on your imagination capabilities, all of that, and it's not worth killing that for, some belief in the right path. So yeah, even though I am aware that I might be struggling with some parts of writing because I have never really started from short stories, I stand by what I said before when I was a young teenager, and I stand by it today. Write what you want to write. And to be honest with you, I have a feeling that with the rise of the internet, all of those responsible adults and the writers that took the proper path and that would like to teach our youth to take the proper path and, go step by step, little steps, and to the greatness slowly but surely, they will have more and more problems convincing anyone that this is the right way, because anyone anyone with the ability to use Google can see so many success stories of people that started with novels. All of those young adults, Hunger Games or Divergent or whatever was written by young women, they have not started with short stories, not that I know of. If I'm wrong, then I'm sorry, I apologize. I've never heard of it. When I was younger, we had the bloody Aragon that started from, I don't know if it was, if it wasn't just some sort of gossip that started with his marketing campaign that he was writing on toilet paper, because he was so poor, and then he was going through the schools trying to advertise the novel. We have people in Poland that have never written a single short story that are being published in both fantasy and crime and all the other genres. And when you have a teenager that has a head full of dreams and really believes that they are the prodigy, that they can do it, you're not gonna make them write short stories and go slow if they can just plunge right into it. And I think that's fair, I'd rather just plunge into it with big dreams and big hopes and big excitement, just fall flat on my face, than spend my life just, and it's also possible I'd never get anywhere if I did that as well. So at least I did what I thought was right. And at the end of the day, that also has a value, They were my mistakes, and I also don't blame anyone for it. So that also helps when it comes to, evaluating why you're where you are. In my case, nowhere. And worst case scenario, in 15 years you'll have something to rant about on a vlog you made when you tell people you're nowhere. But I'm not talking about this to tell you that I've never written short stories and that one that I've written before was all I've done, and yeah, this is the end of the episode. No. See, when the rejections started to pile up for me, when the Polish book flopped and the new Amazing Nightmare flopped, and then Because Death Wanted Butterflies flopped, the short story idea came back on my radar. And at first, it was supposed to be on YouTube, as I've talked about before, but after that, I've decided maybe I should write a short story, Say what you may, the big factor is that you can try many more times. Because writing a book If you're really fast at it, I suppose you can do it in a few months, but I'm not fast at it. I'm not fast at anything. For me, a book is like at least a 3 years commitment, maybe 2 if that was all I had to do. 1 if I really had nothing else to do and actually had a muse and it wasn't too long of a book. But my books have taken me a long time to write and then revise and write again and rewrite and change things and add things and revise again, you know. A short story, even for somebody as pathologically slow as I am, it's like maybe a month-long commitment. If you're writing something short, it could be a day, it could be a few days, it could be a week. Depends how fast you write, what the levels of your muse and your general predisposition to not being a slowpoke. You can churn out so many short stories in the time you would write one book that, well, it just gives you more chances to do something right? To hit the mark, to find an idea that just works for whoever would be publishing it. And even if it flops, it stings, okay, it stings, it still feels real bad, but it doesn't feel as horrible as, you know, a project that you've been working on 3 years crashing and burning. So there are upsides, there are definite upsides to it. Not to mention the entire process is faster. You will find out if your story has been accepted or rejected in like a month's time. So you won't have to wait like 6 months to maybe or maybe not get a rejection in mail. Yeah, I'm still waiting. So I had a few short stories ideas floating around in my head because I was thinking about doing that YouTube project kind of thing. I've chosen one of them. It was very loosely inspired by a map for Heroes Who Might be Magic Free I've played once. It was called, the story, not the map, the story was called The Value of Nothing. And I quite like the idea. I still quite like the idea of it. It came out really long. It came out, well, longer than the longest one that would be accepted, and that's 25,000 words accepted by Science Fiction and Fantasy magazine. I've shortened it a little bit, trimmed some fat and got it down to 24,999 words. Oh, wish I was kidding. No, I wasn't. I'm not kidding. It was long. But it was quite, I suppose, epic in scope. So, kinda worked, right? It was rejected, of course, but I got a really, really nice rejection. It was personalized, it was kind, it was encouraging, and it was so refreshing to hear what doesn't work in your work. And honestly, they could reject every story I ever write and I will never say a bad word about them because they got class. They got class in how they reject you, and it was great. And of course I was, you know, googling a lot about the magazine and the rejections they send out and the sort of things you can get from them in terms of feedback. And apparently it was one of the high-tier rejections that you get when your story was like acceptably good, just not good enough. I don't know if it was. I have mentioned in my cover letter, you know, it was like 2 sentences, that this is the first story I've ever written, short story that I've ever written and I sent, and I suspect this might be why they sent me such a nice rejection, but I don't know, they said it in a very encouraging way and it worked. I did not feel discouraged, I did not feel ignored, offended or anything like that. I did not feel confused. For the first time I knew what I'd done wrong in it. And it was great. And for that single reason, if you're trying to write science fiction or fantasy and you don't know why your books are getting rejected and you're getting, you know, demotivated with the whole querying process or anything, maybe write a short story and send it there. If they publish it, that's amazing, great, good job. But if they don't, at least you will get a word from a human. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it means so much after you get just form things but no, and just deaf silence all the time for years. So of course I kept the rejection, and here it is. Thank you for giving me a chance to read The Value of Nothing. I'm really glad you worked up the nerve and decided to submit this story. I like the quality of the prose, and I thought that this had interesting characters and, most importantly in something this length, layers. At the same time, the beginning developed slowly for me. I thought maybe we needed a stronger sense of Sestroya's goals and ambitions, so that we knew what she was losing by being locked up. I also thought the narrative could be tighter and a little faster paced, in places through the middle. Overall, this story didn't quite win me over. We buy only a few novellas each year. Stories longer than 17,500 words up to 25,000 words. Usually 4 to 5. So things this length really have to shine from start to finish. And I'm going to have to pass on it for fantasy and science fiction. But there's good writing there. I wish you best of luck finding the right market for it. And it doesn't exist, it's too long. And hope you'll try us again with your next new story. Which I had. Best regards, Charlie. So after I got this rejection, I have of course gone over the story, I have cut out the parts that seemed slow, I have refurbished it, I have, tried to work on shortening it, which was a very good practice, because, it's really good to know how to shorten your work and trim more fat from it. Sentences, scenes, descriptions that are just not really necessary. That was a very, very good practice. And I suppose, this is something you can definitely learn from writing short stories, though you can also shorten your novels. It just takes a lot longer. So I have cut, I think, 4,000 words out of it, which is a lot for a story that had 25 of them. And still, it was long because the story was just long. I would have to just write a different story if I wanted to make it much shorter. Sadly, the only other place that could accept a story over 20,000 words was the Clark's Word magazine, and they don't really publish fantasy much. It's mostly science fiction magazine. They allow you to send fantasy, but they even mention that it's very rare, and I really didn't expect them to accept this story because it's not conceptual, it's nothing strange, like a bizarre kind of fantasy. It's kind of straightforward. It's not hard fantasy, with fireballs and dragons and all of that, but it's still very vividly fantasy. So I was not surprised at all when they rejected it. It's fine, but I had to send it, the revised version, so at least there was that. But it was, all in all, I think it was a very positive experience for me. Unlike all of those rejected queries that I never knew what's wrong with them, if it's a query or anything else. This was great. I can say a bad word. I've learned a lot about, shortening my work. I've learned where I can have some troubles with construction and all, and I felt encouraged to keep on trying. And so I did. So, even though the story wasn't good enough to be published in the science fiction and fantasy magazine, which is really not surprising, because few things ever are, they can pick from anything, so their coolness requirements are probably like here, this story was like here or something. But I still think, especially after shortening it and making it tighter, it's a decent story, so I will probably be reading it on the channel. It's going to be in few parts because it is long, but a novella, I suppose, like they called it. I don't know, you'll get to judge for yourself. So for my next story, I wanted to do something shorter, much shorter. And I've chosen an idea that I've drafted when I was thinking about writing this book, fairy tales. I wouldn't write a fairy tale, but I took the general idea and I've decided to just kind of wing it. I never kind of wing things. I'm definitely someone that plans it all out and then thinks about it and then writes it and rewrites it and rethinks it and all of that. And I was like, not this time. This is a simple idea, kind of easy to write in a way. Well, maybe not easy to write, but like straightforward. So there was no need to sit and you know, write everything down and connect it and just like make a murder scene kind of tab with ribbons and okay, I don't go that far ever. I might have gone that far once. Never mind. It was called The Other One, and it was a story from the perspective of a little girl that's locked underground somewhere for some reason, and of course it was a little bit of a mystery. Why and all that? I'm not going to spoil it because, well, if I'm going to be reading my short stories, I will read this one too. This would probably be just one video because it is not long. And I think I've sent this story first to the Clarksworth magazine this time, you know, to mix things up a little bit, and it actually got to the second round, which was great and probably my biggest literary achievement to date, because apparently it's like 3% of the stories that ever get to the second part, and then like 10% of that gets published or whatever. But it got there, and I was really rather hyped about it. And of course it was rejected in the end, because otherwise it wouldn't be in this video. But I don't know, I felt pretty good about it. I mean, if all you ever get is rejection, then getting rejected in the big boy's turn, that was pretty good for me. Maybe one day. Well, this story didn't actually go anywhere. After that, this was, I guess, an editor there just took a liking. Maybe they liked the mystery or they liked the character. Something in there vibed right for them. It didn't vibe right for the science fiction fantasy magazine. And I think I also sent it to the Strange Horizons, where it got stuck for like 2 months. So if I've learned anything from that is the magazine where you send your stories last. No offense, but they take a long time. Compared to science fiction fantasy that has a turnaround of like average of 3-4 days, on rejections of course, and the Clarksworth is similar. Maybe you will wait a week and a month if you're in the second part or whatever, but Strange Horizons, it's gone. I mean, if they publish it in the end, that's fine, but if you want to, you know, try to sell your stories in various places, that's probably not the place you send it to first. After that, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. I was still not done with this whole enterprise of sending short stories out and writing them. And I decided to take the Beaver Bog story, The Lonely Miss Misery, that I've talked about in the previous episode, I believe. The problem with it was that it was never meant to be a short story. It was meant to be a case-based kind of longer thing that would probably be like book-sized. And so the introduction that I wrote to it, that I quite liked, was slow. And I was aware of it, but I didn't want to maul it and cut it out and just leave like a sliver of it and take away all of the charm it had. I have tried to add a story to the rest of it, like expand it into something that was short story sized, which I've done, but predictably I've gotten a rejection that said that, yeah, the beginning was too slow. And that's completely fair, because as far as short stories go, it just didn't really work, because it wasn't meant for that. And damn, they really they really saw right through me there. No hard feelings, of course, but I suppose I have like a draft of something I could turn into a novel one day, right? I have a beginning and I have sort of a story that goes after it, just the rest would have to be expanded to fit the beginning. It was kind of like Frankenstein, and like the really slow and book-like, novel-like beginning, and then short stories. Not good. But I tried, right? I had to try. Then I wrote something strange. It was an idea that came to me when I was taking a shower, and I just ran with it. It wasn't exactly fantasy, it was like not exactly science fiction, I don't know what it was, like closer to science fiction than fantasy. And it had a good opening. I write pretty good openings, but then the story kind of like, I don't know, it got weird. And it seemed fine, but it wasn't fine enough, you know? Something in the middle of it just didn't flow right, because the beginning was what came to me in the shower and the general idea. And after that, I tried to rush it, and I didn't come up with the right expansion, the right parts for the middle of it. That's the problem for me, because my brain is slow. It takes time. When I have an idea for a book or a story or whatever, it's like the idea comes, I can write a cool beginning, and then I have to just let it go, let it just stew in my brain, and day by day, a little bit here, a little bit here, a piece, something will come and piece together and start to make sense, and sometimes be a kind of fine ideas. But when I try to just sit down and figure it out, like force it, I write garbage. And well, that makes it pretty hard for me to try and, you know, be just one of those writers that just goes and just makes tons of money and fame and produces 3 books a year. Yes, I'm talking about Remigiusz Mróz, our Polish crime story spammer. He has, I don't know, he writes so many books, it's impossible. I would never be able to do it. By the time he writes like 5 books, I would be like finishing to plot 1 short story or whatever. Yeah, that's not me. So I think I just didn't give this story enough time, and well, it wasn't good enough. There's nothing more to say about it. And then I started working on the story called The Field of Paper Flowers. That was something I wanted to write for a while. It was initially a part of the Because Death Wanted Frozen Butterflies book, but I have replaced it later with something that fit better. But the idea was still there, and I definitely still wanted to explore it one day. And I've decided to do it in the form of a short story. But I couldn't quite piece it together. And I let it be. I put it away and started to write something else. And I also let that be and started to write something else. The next one was, I think it was the one with the demon. And honestly, it has a very cool beginning. And I want to return to this story one day, but it had a cool beginning, and I know what I wanted to do with the premise of it. It's supposed to be a joke-like story, kind of mocking the whole internet scam kind of thing. I've watched a shit ton of scam baiting videos, and they are really fun, and I really think there is something to it. And the story is kind of fun. I just need to figure out the exact way to go about it. You know, I need to give my brain some time, though it's not really actively in there, but one day I think it could be kind of fun. Maybe I will read the beginning to it in some episode, just for fun, like not a separate video, but or maybe not, I don't know. Either way, I let it be, because I couldn't quite figure out how to make it funny enough and engaging enough in the later part. So then I also considered writing a similar kind of thing, as in take a real world concept and turn it into some sort of funny fantasy kind of romp. And it was supposed to be based on the MLM, the multi-level marketing. It was kind of working, but kind of didn't, so I also let that one be. It's sometimes like that, because I come up with an idea that kind of works, I have a character, I have an opening that kind of works, but then I feel that it doesn't have that spark, and it's just not worth writing if I don't feel it has the spark. So the next story I wrote and actually completed, I thought had the spark. It didn't, or it wouldn't be mentioned in this episode, but I thought it was pretty good. It had a good opening. Again, yes, I write pretty good openings. It had a good opening, which I was told in my rejection. It's not me tooting my own horn, but it lost emotional impact midway. And it's probably because I suck at writing short stories. I like writing novels. I like having time to get into things, to build up, to write different, subplots that come together and create this impact. And since I have literally almost no experience with short stories, since I don't like short forms, I simply blew it. I tried to make it concise. I tried not to talk too much, try not to make, some lead-up scenes, and I did not find the way to make it spark without it. I should have. If I wanted to write a good story, if it was supposed to be a good story, I should have found it. It's not that it needs all of this big build-up. It's just hard. Sometimes it's just hard to figure out how to construct your story, to come up with the good idea, and that's the truth of it. I will probably read the story on the channel. It's decent. It's not great, but it's decent. And I was thinking, somebody once asked me to talk a little bit about my process, thinking process, writing process, all of that, technical things, technical stuff that goes into writing, not exactly technical like, how you put your commas, but I guess that might be something that comes next. I will read a short story and then I will try to analyze it, talk about it, think about where the mistakes can be, what went right, what went wrong, and I invite anyone who's into that to participate. Tell me what you think sucked, tell me what you think was nice, and maybe that's something that could be kind of a cool interlude here before I get another rejection that I can make a vlog about. Alright, so where am I now? 2020, June, almost over, almost 30, like a month left. Well, I have returned to the field of the paper flowers, the story that I wanted to write for a while. I have finally figured it out. I think my brain clicked, the muse came, and this is what I'm going to do next. I'm going to write the story, I'm going to send it out, and I'm gonna write to the writer, they guys, that somebody takes it before I turn 30 and have nothing to show for it. Do I expect it to be accepted? Not really, not after all of that, but I want to try, and it's probably the last short story that I'm going to try with, because looking at what it is, what it's shaping up to be, I don't think I can do much better in the realm of short stories. So if that one won't be enough, maybe one day I'll write the funny demon one, the scam baiting one, just for fun, because apparently humor is not very common and they like to get it, so I might try it one day. But I have quite a lot of my own, silly notions and shit riding on this short story I'm writing right now, so I hope it will be good. But I don't really believe it will. Guess we'll find out. And that will probably be the next, well, no, I have one more vlog coming, like the regular kind of thing. And then it's probably going to be about this story. Because what else could I be talking about right now? The only things I would be talking about right now would be bloody politics. And that's neither fun nor smart, because anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of the internet. And I don't want to go to that court. Let me be honest with you. So let's keep it nice and neutral and talk about more fun things like the endless pit of despair that is my rejection story time. Alright, so I'm going to be signing off for today, and I'm gonna go back to working on the flowers story. Wish me luck. And stay healthy. Bye!